who is the ADCC GOAT across a series of videos. Ross, me, and Calum, my co-host as always, the Jiu Jitsu Oracle, we are going to tell you who we think is the ADCC GOAT. But along the way, we're going to pay our respects to the greats of the game in our ADCC tier list, which is going to be much like the tier lists that we created to preview this year's ADCC and CJI, where we split grapplers from category S at the top through to category D. So, Calum, why don't you give us some insight as to how we're splitting the guys across this ADCC tier list?
Yeah, we're going to have an S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. The A tiers and the S tiers are where we're actually going to have the GOAT discussion, and the rest are going to be slightly different categories, but I wanted to expand it to beyond people that are directly in the GOAT conversation, because there's a lot more to ADCC and a lot of good characters and stories from ADCC. So, S tier, when we get around to it, these are going to be our picks for who we think is the ADCC GOAT. Might be more than one person, might be a couple, might be a few, but these are like the very strong contenders to be the ADCC GOAT. A tier means you're in the conversation, but probably not our pick, but can definitely make an argument, and they're within the conversation to be the ADCC GOAT. B tier, got this as the strong champion tier, so if you're in this tier, you've won more than once, 2 or 3 times, you're just not quite in the GOAT conversation for whatever reason, but strong champions that have won their divisions or multiple divisions more than once. C tier is going to be guys that have won one title. There's not going to be every ADCC champion that's won once. We've named this as the notable champion, so guys that have won once that are notable names, big names from either other things like MMA, or they had a really big run in ADCC, guys that are worth talking about that have won one time. And D tier, we've got this as ADCC legend that hasn't actually won. So these guys haven't managed to get the gold, but they're still ADCC legends. Maybe they've medaled multiple times, done a bunch of events, had big things happen when they've competed at ADCC, or they're just big names in general.
And in this video, we're going to introduce some grapplers that we have in the B, C, and D categories, and that'll help illustrate those categories. S and A, we're going to keep our powder dry. We're going to reveal that later on, when we really get into like who is the GOAT discussion. Now, in this video, there's going to be 4 guys in B tier, 2 guys in C tier, and 3 guys in D tier that we talk about. Calum, what are the characteristics that we're using to judge these people by?
Well, obviously, like I mentioned, titles is going to be a big one. C tier is specifically guys that have won one. D tier is specifically guys that haven't won any but have maybe medaled. And then B tier, I said specifically, are guys that have won 2 or 3 times. So how many titles you've got is going to be quite a big thing. Your submission rate as well. So if you won 2 times and got a lot of subs in that versus someone that won 2 times and didn't get a lot of subs, that's going to weigh into it as well. Strength of schedule, who you beat on your way to get your titles, or who you beat in your individual runs, and then like storylines as well. Someone that we're going to talk about has a good storyline in this video, so that's going to play into it as well.
I also award style points, so how you played as you won. And then another factor that we've thought about is dominance. So that could be, did you clear out the division? Did you win weight and absolute the same year? Did you win back-to-back titles? Did you go back-to-back-to-back? So dominance comes into it as well.
And this is just for what they've done in ADCC. However, when it comes to D and C, because it's notable champions and legends that haven't won, maybe things they've done outside of ADCC and outside of Jiu Jitsu are going to play into it because they're such big names, and that's why I've put them in that category. But aside from that, especially when it comes to the GOAT discussion, it's only what they've done in ADCC.
Okay, give us something to talk about.
Yeah, so let's kick off D tier with the guy that I've got at the top of D tier, the biggest legend that hasn't won. I've got that as Craig Jones.
Because?
So Craig is 2-time silver medalist. in 2019 and 2021. Every win of his he's had, aside from Nicholas Marigali, has came by way of submission. He had that big breakout performance in 2017 where we saw him submit Leandro Lo, Murilo Santana, and Chael Sonnen all in the same event. So 3 very big names there. And then his next 2 runs, he went on to get silver in those 2 runs where he beat Ben Dyson, Mason Fowler, John Blank before losing to Mateus Denise. And then later on, he beat Joe Costa, Kyle Bem, and Nicholas Marigali before losing to Kynan. So that's what he did in ADCC, but Craig is a massive name in general. That's why he is in this category. That's why he's leading this category. And as well, a big part of ADCC's storyline as of late, he's been a big part of that, kind of creating the rival to ADCC and pushing them to get the athletes higher pay. So that's why I've got him at the top of the legends that haven't won tier.
Okay. Why don't you give us an example of an athlete from one of the other tiers?
Yeah, so at my top of C tier, the notable champions that have won once, I've got Kade Ruotolo.
Okay.
So
why have you got Kade at the top of C tier?
Yeah, I've got Kade at the top just because he won once. He's only been to ADCC once, but it was a flawless run. Every match won by submission, and his strength of schedule was amazing in that as well. I think he's got the potential to move up in this tier list as his career progresses, but he's obviously just done ADCC the once. In that one time that he did it, he submitted Lachlan Giles, then Roberto Jimenez, then PJ Barch, and then Mika Gavel, which is like really good for his strength of schedule. So that's why I've got him at the top of C tier for notable champions.
Okay. And then why don't we go into B tier now?
Yeah, so my top of B tier, I've got Cobrinha. So Cobrinha comes into strong champion for me. He has won 3 times. The thing maybe holding him back from being in the GOAT discussion is his strength of schedule. He beat Rafa Mendes. That's massive for him. He also lost to Rafa twice. So he's got 2 silvers where he lost to Rafa in the finals of 2009 and 2011. But then onwards from them, he was a very dominant champion in the 66 kilo division where he won 2013, 2015 and 2017. So like I say, not the strongest strength of schedule, but he's got some good names in there like Marcio Andre, AJ Agazarm, who he beat in the final of 2017, Johnny Grippo, etc. So he's got some good names, but I think his strength of schedule holds him back a little bit as well as his submission count. But overall, back-to-back championships in that 66 kilo division is still very impressive.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that we're focusing on ADCC. So one of Cobrinha's victories came in a year where he won the Super Grand Slam. So super dominant. But we're focusing more on just what he did specifically in this competition. So that's giving you a flavour of who we have and where we have them. Why don't we just carry on with naming athletes? Who do you want to talk about next?
Let's stick on B tier and talk about Braulio Estima.
Okay.
So earlier on, Braulio had a couple cracks at ADCC and didn't do the best. He lost in his first round, his first time around, and then won one and lost one after that. But he had a really, really good run in 2009 where he double golded. He won his weight class in the 88 kilo division, and then he won the absolute. And then I believe he lost his super fight next time around. Was that to Gavel, I believe, next time around? So didn't hold on to that super fight title for too long, but did manage to get double gold. And then if you look at his strength of schedule in that double gold run, it is debatably the best that we've ever seen. So he, on that day, submitted Rafael Lovato Jr. He submitted Andre Galvao with an inverted triangle. That's another thing with Braulio. He's got a cool story of bringing out that inverted triangle that he's known for, so that kind of adds to his lore a little bit. But moving on, he submitted Marcelo Garcia. He beat Vinny Magalhaes by points, and he beat Janji Ribeiro. I think Janji got injured in that match, but nonetheless, to beat Janji Magalhaes and then submit Marcelo, Andre, and Lovato in one day is very, very impressive.
And when you think about strength of schedule, and the opponents that were beaten, you need to think of those opponents at that time.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about some of these guys, the version of them we've seen more recently. When you think of Janjay back in the day, you think of someone that was able to beat Roger Gracie. Yeah. So, like, it's like his ADCC performances haven't been as strong as that that went before. But yeah, so it's like super impressive when you beat these guys when they were, at the peak of their game. But yeah, Braulio, massive style points, huge strength of schedule, sub victories. So like they'll add to his.
Just a correction on myself from earlier. I think he did win his super fight next time around. I think that was against Jacques. So that's another point for him. But I think it was the next year around that he lost to Goval. So that's another pro for him that he managed to beat Jacques in the super fight next time around. So
was that 2011?
Yeah, that was 2011
in Nottingham.
Yeah, were you there for that?
I was there for that. I don't remember much about the match.
Yeah, fair enough.
But that was Braulio competing on home turf. So I believe he was the guy that sort of organised it that year because it was in Nottingham and he's based in Birmingham, not too far away. Anyway, let's talk about someone else, Calum, before we get too far into the 2011 ADCC specifically.
Okay, let's go back down to D tier.
Okay, let's
talk about someone who doesn't have a title but probably has the strongest storyline and was definitely, even though he didn't win, he was definitely like the spotlight of that year. That is Lachlan Giles. So Lachlan, in his weight class, I don't believe has ever won a match. I think he's had some rough first round matches. I know he had Lucas Lepre the year that he had his absolute run. I know he's had JT when JT was champion. He got Kade when Kade was champion. So he's had some very tough matches first time around. But I think it was 2021 or was it 2019? No, 2019. It was 2019 where he entered the absolute division and Kade Ruotolo had just won his weight class and Lachlan went out and submitted him first round. Kind of ruined the division in a way because I think everyone was gearing up to see Kynan and Gordon face each other in the finals. Lachlan ruined that for everyone by heel hooking Kynan in the first round, but it was still spectacular to see. Yeah.
I was just going to say, but he's made the Kynan-Gordon match bigger next time around.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting how the story plays out. So we might eventually get Kynan versus Gordon just about 2 years from now.
Yeah.
So, and like delaying the match and holding it off a bit might have made it more interesting. So maybe Lachlan didn't ruin it for everyone.
He didn't actually ruin it. It was very exciting to see. But at the time, I think everyone was excited to see that match. So he beat Kynan first round, who had just won his weight class, being several weight classes above Lachlan, and then he heel hooked Padre Gaudio in his second match, who again several weight classes above Lachlan. He then lost to Gordon in the semi-final match before winning his bronze medal match against Muhammad Ali, who again is significantly bigger than Lachlan. So that was really cool to see. For the next couple of years, everyone was a little bit obsessed with K-Gordon backside 50-50, so definitely had a big impact on the meta of Jiu-Jitsu. And yeah, just the names that he was able to submit being significantly lower in weight was definitely one of the most epic moments in ADCC that I can remember.
Agreed. So he's worthy of a place on the list. One of the great ADCC runs, some of the great ADCC moments, but not with a gold medal to his name. Will we move up again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's have a look at Jean-Jacques Machado. So he has won one time at ADCC, which was back in 2019. Not going to lie, looking at his run, they might have been good grapplers at the time, but I don't recognise any of those names.
What year?
1999.
Right. I think you might have said 2019.
Okay. No. 1999. However, even though he didn't win in 2000, he did beat Leo Vieira, so that's a notable win for him at ADCC. So he has had some big wins, but he is a notable champion just because of how famous he is in the jiu-jitsu culture. Obviously, Joe Rogan has a very big impact and influence in jiu-jitsu, gets a lot of people into jiu-jitsu. Joe Rogan speaks about Jean-Jacques a lot, with him being Eddie Bravo's coach and Eddie Bravo being Joe Rogan's coach. Cool as well that he was able to do it with his disability of missing fingers. I think he had some more success in ADCC than he did in the gi back in the day because of that, so that's pretty cool for him as well. And, you know, he's obviously a massive name in jiu-jitsu because of those guys I just mentioned.
Yep. Up again.
Yeah, so another guy from B tier that we'll talk about is JT. So when you say strong champion, JT definitely springs to mind with his run from 2017 to 2019, I think it was. He was very dominant in those 2 years, looked very unbeatable. The big thing holding him back is in those 2 runs, he was flawless in a way that I don't think he was ever scored on or really looked in danger, but he also didn't get a single submission from any of those 8 matches. Strength of schedule was good, beat Lachlan Giles, beat Gary Tonin, beat Lucas Lepre, beat Gary Tonin again, beat Wagner Hocha, so definitely some good names, and he looks very flawless and untouchable, but I think the submissions were holding him back. Earlier on, he had some good success as well, but was beaten by the likes of Crow and Gracie a little bit earlier on before he had that run, and then since then he's not looked as good. He's been able to win his first round match in the 2 most recent ADCCs, but in that run, he definitely looked very dominant and untouchable, but I do think the submissions, or lack thereof, is holding him back a little bit, but definitely in the strong category tier with 2 titles.
I think that's fair enough. And yeah, if you have a run where you're considered the guy, then I think that is deserving of a pretty high ranking. And he was definitely the man to beat for a good spell of time. So, yeah, deserving of B status. Right. Yeah. Will we go back down to D?
Yeah, let's do it. So, last guy we're going to talk about from here is Nicky Rod. So as far as accomplishments, same as Craig Jones, he's a 2-time silver medalist. Believe he got his 2 silvers, the same ADCCs as Craig Jones as well. Remember his breakout run pretty well. He beat Muhammad Ali, Orlando Sanchez, and Cyborg back to back to back, and there was a big thing about him just being a blue belt and doing that to all these black belts. That was not to say new, because guys had done that earlier on in ADCC with guys like Mark Kerr and Chris Weidman, but I think at the time it was a bit of a shock. I hadn't seen as much of that recently with like blue belts with other grappling experience coming in and doing really well against the best in the world, so some good storyline and lore to that, but he looked really good in that run. And then he also got silver next time around in 2021, where he beat Damon Ramos, John Hansen, and Felipe Pena. So some big names on his resume. I would say he's a bit of a legend. He's obviously won CGI this time around and definitely has the potential to win ADCC and climb up the tier list later in his career. But I think for now, he's definitely a legend that hasn't yet got a title.
Yeah, and I think we said before that what you've done outside of ADCC is more of a factor in the D category, where we're just talking about big names, guys who deserve some recognition for what they've achieved, but they're not in discussions around about the GOAT or like just being below GOAT status, but yeah, super dominant champions and stuff like that. So we're just wanting to flag up some of the guys that have done amazing things. I think, like, especially with Nicky Rod, probably more so than like a Lachlan Giles, his story is still being written. Yeah. Nicky Rod may yet be the guy to beat Gordon's streak of wins. We'll see what he goes on to do. But yeah, I think like that CGI victory has added to like his status, etc., within like the wider no-gi game. But yeah, he's had a couple of good runs at ADCC. I think he's definitely got potential to win ADCC gold in the future, should he choose to go back and do it. But yeah, right now he's just like a guy who's of renown, who's had some moments in ADCC that deserve to get recognised.
Yeah.
Okay, one last guy in B tier that we're going to talk about today, someone close to your heart.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Rafa Mendes. Rafa won 2 times as well as a silver, but I've got him quite high up B, partly because of favoritism, partly because at the time he was the youngest ever ADCC champion. I think Kade maybe took that from him, although I'm kind of confused by that because I remember that being the case, that everyone said Kade was now the youngest champion, but I'm sure he won when he was 19 and Rafa won when he was 18. But nonetheless, in 2009, when Rafa won, he was the youngest ever ADCC champion. In that run, he beat Cobrinha in the final. He also submitted Leo Vieira. He went back-to-back in 2019, managing to get gold there as well. And then in 2013, he had silver, losing to Cobrinha in the final of that, but he managed to beat some notable names like Jacques. So good style points for Rafa as well. Very strong attack in the back and anacondas. Very good guard passing and guard play, but was unable to get 3 titles, although he was the youngest champion at the time, winning in 2009.
Do you know how old he was when he stopped competing?
Altogether or at ADCC?
Well, either or. I don't really mind. Just even roughly.
Well, in 2009, he was 18. He stopped in 2016. So that is 25 when he stopped. So my age when he stopped. So by the time Rafa was my age, he was already 6-time GI world champion and 2-time ADCC world champion. So yeah, that's a bit crazy.
Yeah. So I just wonder what his ceiling was, for like ADCC and stuff like that. Like I think he would probably been able to add a couple more titles to his resume. But yeah, definitely as well, like talking about style, like the influence on the game, I think Rafa's influence is still being massively felt in the no-gi game and the gi game, but as we're talking more about ADCC. So it's funny like how things come back in vogue and stuff like that. Like we've just spent a long time, well, I've particularly been doing a deep dive into the leg drag recently. It's kind of like a pass that like you didn't see so much of, but I think now you're starting to see a bit more of again. And yeah. Rafa was obviously the goal of the leg drag, S tier, that's undisputed. Yeah. So, but yeah, fair. You've put him alongside Cobrinha, career rival.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, do you lean one way or the other when it comes to those two?
I think you have to put Cobrinha above just because he's got the one more title. However, I think Rafa doing it at a young age puts him up there for sure. But yeah, I think you have to slightly put Cobrinha above him just given the fact that he was able to get one more than Rafa. So
we can say, although Calum has a soft spot for Rafa Mendes, he is not blinded as to just giving
Rafa. Jiu-Jitsu, I've definitely got Rafa above Cobrinha, but we're sticking to just what they did in the ADCC. So Cobrinha.
I'm just saying you're a fair judge, Calum.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've ran through 9 guys from B, C, and D tiers on our first ADCC legend list. We're not going to talk about S and A yet. That's to come because that is going to revolve around the GOAT.
However, please comment who you think is going to be in those tiers and who's your ADCC GOAT, as well as who else you think is going to be in B, C, and D.
Yes, give us your comments. What I will say is that B, C, and D are quite extensive.
Yeah.
So we'll see how many videos we need to get through them all. But yeah, let us know what you think about where we've placed people so far, and let us know your thoughts on anyone you want included in any of the tiers. But while the no-gi game is so quiet just now, rather disappointingly, as everyone recovers from CGI and ADCC, and promotions miss the chance to build on the hype of those 2 events, we're going to dive into the ADCC and ultimately say who we think is the greatest of all time in that promotion.